The basement door had been locked for months. Officer Rachel Martinez and her K9 partner Shadow were conducting a welfare check on the old Victorian house when the German Shepherd did something unprecedented. He broke away from her control and hurled himself against the basement door until the wood splintered and gave way. What Shadow found in the darkness below would expose a human trafficking operation that had been hiding in plain sight for over 2 years and save 7 people who had been chained in conditions that defied human comprehension. Welcome to Saved by Tales. Before we dive into this harrowing story of a K9's determination to break through barriers and rescue the forgotten, tell me in the comments, have you ever seen an animal become obsessed with getting into a place that seemed off limits? And if you believe these incredible stories of animal heroes breaking rules to save lives deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button and join our community, celebrating the 4-legged heroes who know when breaking in means breaking free. Neighbors on Elm Street had reported concerns about the old Morrison house, strange sounds at night, occasional glimpses of movement in windows that were supposed to be empty, and an odd smell that seemed to emanate from the Victorian structure that had sat abandoned for over a year. Officer Rachel Martinez was assigned the welfare check along with her K9 partner, Shadow, a 4-year-old German Shepherd with specialized training in drug detection and human tracking. The Morrison house had a complicated history. The elderly owner had died intestate, and the property had been tied up in legal proceedings while distant relatives fought over the estate. Probably just squatters, Martinez told Shadow as they approached the imposing 3-story house. Maybe some homeless folks found a way in during the cold weather. The Victorian sat back from the street, surrounded by overgrown hedges and a wrought iron fence that had seen better days. Most of the windows were boarded up, and the front porch sagged under the weight of neglect. It looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, an empty house waiting for probate court to decide its fate. But Shadow's behavior suggested otherwise. The moment they stepped onto the property, Shadow became intensely focused. His nose went to the ground, his ears perked forward, and he began working a scent trail that led directly to the house's foundation. "What is it, boy?" Martinez asked, watching her partner's systematic search pattern. Shadow was displaying his tracking behavior, the focused, methodical approach he used when following human scent. Martinez checked the front and back entrances to the house, finding both securely locked with no signs of forced entry. The boarded windows appeared undisturbed, and there was no obvious way that squatters could have gained access to the building. But Shadow remained agitated, pulling Martinez around to the side of the house where a narrow stairway led down to what appeared to be a basement entrance. The door at the bottom of the stairs was solid oak, reinforced with metal bands, and secured with a heavy padlock that looked new despite the house's abandoned state. "That's odd," Martinez muttered, examining the lock. "Why would someone put a new lock on an abandoned house?" Shadow's reaction to the basement door was immediate and violent. The dog began pawing at the door, whining, and exhibiting signs of extreme agitation. When Martinez tried to lead him away to continue their perimeter check, Shadow resisted, pulling back toward the door with unusual determination. "Shadow, heel," Martinez commanded, but the dog ignored her completely. His entire focus was on what lay beyond that locked door. Then Shadow did something that would haunt Martinez for the rest of her career. The dog backed up several steps, lowered his head, and charged the door with the full force of his 80-pound frame. The first impact made the old wood groan, but didn't break the door. Shadow immediately backed up and charged again, throwing his entire body against the barrier with a desperation that Martinez had never seen from her partner. "Shadow, stop," Martinez called, worried that the dog would injure himself. But Shadow was beyond commands, beyond training, beyond everything except the overwhelming need to get through that door. On the third impact, something splintered. On the fourth, the door frame began to give way. Martinez realized that Shadow wasn't going to stop until he broke through, so she radioed for backup and prepared to follow her partner into whatever lay beyond. The final charge broke the door completely. Shadow disappeared into the darkness below, his barking echoing up from the basement in a frantic, urgent pattern that made Martinez's blood run cold. She followed, flashlight in hand, down a narrow wooden staircase that creaked under her weight. The smell hit her halfway down, human waste, fear, and something else she couldn't identify, but that made her stomach churn. At the bottom of the stairs, Martinez's flashlight beam revealed a scene that would be burned into her memory forever. The basement had been converted into what could only be described as a human warehouse. 7 people, ranging in age from teenagers to middle-aged adults, were chained to the walls in conditions that defied comprehension. They were malnourished, dirty, and clearly terrified, squinting in the sudden light after what had obviously been extended periods in darkness. Shadow moved among them gently, no longer the aggressive force that had broken down the door. He seemed to understand that these people needed comfort, not protection, and he provided it with the calm presence that made him excellent at his job. "Jesus Christ," Martinez whispered, calling immediately for emergency medical response, additional police units, and FBI assistance. "This is Officer Martinez. I have multiple victims in the basement of 1247 Elm Street. Request immediate medical response and federal assistance. This appears to be a human trafficking operation." The victims were in various states of physical and psychological trauma. Some appeared to have been held for months. others for what might have been years. They spoke little English and seemed terrified of everyone except Shadow, who moved among them with gentle reassurance. Within an hour, the Morrison house was swarming with emergency responders. Paramedics worked to stabilize the victims while FBI agents secured the scene and began processing evidence. The basement revealed the systematic operation of a human trafficking ring that had been using the abandoned house as a holding facility. "This is one of the most sophisticated operations we've ever uncovered," FBI agent Lisa Rodriguez told Martinez as they watched the victims being loaded into ambulances. The house was perfect cover, legally abandoned, neighbors expected it to be empty, and the basement was completely soundproofed. The victims were from various countries, brought to the United States under false pretenses, and then held against their will. They'd been used for forced labor during the day and returned to the basement prison at night, with their captors coming and going through a hidden entrance that connected to the city's old tunnel system. "Without your dog's intervention, we might never have found them," Agent Rodriguez continued. "The operation was too well hidden, too carefully planned. Shadow didn't just break down a door, he broke open a case we didn't even know existed." Dr. Amanda Foster, a veterinary behaviorist specializing in working dogs, was brought in to study Shadow's behavior and understand how he had detected the hidden victims. Shadow was responding to a combination of human scents, distress pheromones, and probably sounds that were inaudible to human ears, Dr. Foster explained. Dogs can hear frequencies much higher than humans, and he was likely detecting the victim's breathing, heartbeats, and movement even through the soundproofing. But why did he become so aggressive about the door? Martinez asked. Shadow's never broken through barriers before. He understood that people were in distress and needed immediate help, Dr. Foster replied. His training told him to alert you to their presence, but his instincts told him that waiting for human intervention might be too late. He took direct action to save lives. The case became a landmark study in canine detection capabilities and the importance of trusting working dogs when they showed unusual determination. The FBI investigation revealed that the trafficking operation had been active for over 3 years, using a network of abandoned and foreclosed properties across the Pacific Northwest. The Morrison house was just one of several facilities where victims were held before being moved to permanent locations for forced labor. The traffickers specifically targeted properties that were tied up in legal proceedings, Agent Rodriguez explained. They knew these houses would remain empty for extended periods while courts sorted out ownership issues. It gave them perfect cover for their operations. The organization had been run by Viktor Petrov, a businessman who operated several legitimate companies as fronts for his trafficking network. He'd been using the victims for labor in his warehouses and agricultural operations, keeping them compliant through threats, isolation, and the constant fear of being turned over to immigration authorities. Computer files found in Petrov's possession revealed the scope of the operation. Over 200 victims had passed through his network in 3 years, with many still unaccounted for in facilities that hadn't yet been discovered. The 7 people rescued from the Morrison house basement required extensive medical and psychological care. They'd suffered from malnutrition, untreated injuries, and severe trauma from their captivity. "These victims have been through unimaginable horror," said Dr. Sarah Kim, who coordinated their medical treatment. "They'll need months or years of care to recover from what they've endured." The victims were from Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras, all brought to the United States with promises of legitimate work and better lives. Instead, they'd been trapped in a nightmare that had seemed impossible to escape. Shadow became part of their recovery process, visiting the medical facility where they were being treated. The dog's gentle presence helped calm their anxiety and provided comfort during their healing process. "The dog saved us," said Maria Santos, one of the victims, through a translator. "We heard him barking and breaking the door. We knew someone was coming to help us. He gave us hope when we had none." Shadow's discovery at the Morrison house led to a nationwide investigation that uncovered trafficking operations in 12 states. The network had been using abandoned properties, foreclosed homes, and buildings tied up in legal disputes as temporary holding facilities for victims. "This case changed how we think about human trafficking," Agent Rodriguez said during a press conference. "These operations can hide anywhere, and they're often in places where we'd never think to look." Shadow proved that sometimes it takes an animal's instincts to find what human investigation misses. The investigation resulted in over 60 arrests and the rescue of more than 150 additional victims from similar facilities across the country. Shadow received national recognition for his role in exposing the trafficking network. He was awarded the American Kennel Club's Award for Canine Excellence and received commendations from law enforcement agencies across the country. But the recognition that meant the most came from the 7 people whose lives he had saved. They held a special ceremony at the medical facility, presenting Shadow with a handmade collar and a letter of gratitude written in multiple languages. "Shadow broke our chains," the letter read. "He didn't just save our lives, he gave us back our freedom." The Morrison house case led to significant changes in how law enforcement approached welfare checks and investigated abandoned properties. Canine units became a standard part of investigations involving properties that might be used for human trafficking. Shadow's case taught us that dogs can detect victims in situations where human senses would miss them completely, explained Captain James Morrison, who developed new training protocols. We now use canine units specifically to check for human trafficking in suspected locations. The techniques developed from studying Shadow's behavior were shared with law enforcement agencies worldwide, improving the detection and rescue of trafficking victims globally. 3 years after the Morrison House rescue, Martinez and Shadow continued their partnership with enhanced focus on human trafficking detection. Their case had made them specialists in this type of investigation, and they'd assisted in dozens of similar operations. Shadow taught me that sometimes breaking the rules is the right thing to do, Martinez reflected. He broke down that door because he knew people were suffering behind it. That's the kind of partner every officer hopes for. Their work had led to several other rescues where Shadow's detection abilities exposed hidden victims in seemingly innocent locations. The 7 victims rescued from the Morrison House eventually recovered enough to begin rebuilding their lives. With assistance from victim services organizations, they received legal status, job training, and ongoing support. Maria Santos, who had become an unofficial spokesperson for the group, often spoke about Shadow's role in their rescue. "He didn't just find us," she said. "He refused to give up on us. That taught us never to give up on ourselves." Several of the survivors became advocates for other trafficking victims, working with law enforcement to identify and rescue people still trapped in similar situations. The Morrison House was eventually demolished, but a small memorial garden was planted on the site to honor the victims who had suffered there and the dog who had saved them. The garden included a statue of a German shepherd with the inscription, "For Shadow, who broke through darkness to bring light." Martinez and Shadow's story became a training tool for law enforcement agencies worldwide, demonstrating the importance of trusting working dogs when they showed unusual determination and the need to investigate thoroughly when animals detected human distress. Shadow's legacy is that he reminded us to trust our partners, even when they're breaking rules to save lives, said Dr. Foster during a conference on working dog behavior. Sometimes the most important breakthroughs happen when we let our animals follow their instincts instead of our protocols. I still think about that grey Tuesday morning, when Shadow decided that a locked door wasn't going to stop him from reaching people who needed help. If Martinez had forced him to heal, if she'd dismissed his aggressive behavior as disobedience or overexcitement, 7 human beings would have continued suffering in darkness while their captors profited from their misery. Shadow's story teaches us something profound about the nature of barriers and the courage to break through them. The traffickers had built their operation around the assumption that a locked door in an abandoned basement would keep their victims hidden from the world. They hadn't counted on a German shepherd who understood that some barriers exist only to hide evil, and that sometimes breaking in means setting people free. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen an animal become obsessed with getting into a place that seemed off limits or dangerous? Have your pets shown unusual determination to access areas where you later discovered something important? These behaviors might be more significant than we realize, especially when innocent lives are at stake. Share your experiences in the comments below, because at Saved by Tales we believe that our 4-legged heroes sometimes know when rules need to be broken to save lives. If Shadow's incredible story moved you, if it reminded you that courage sometimes means breaking through barriers others have built to hide their crimes, please share this video with others who need to hear it. Hit that like button, subscribe to Saved by Tales, and help us continue telling the stories of animals whose determination to reach the unreachable saves lives that would otherwise be lost to darkness. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most important rescues happen when someone refuses to accept that a door is meant to stay closed.